Welcome to OrthoRefresh. My name is Vanessa. This splint reviews how to apply a long arm posterior slab splint for a pediatric patient. This would be appropriate for elbow pathology, such as a distal humerus fracture or elbow dislocation. Enjoy. Splint material, scissors, padding, tape, and you'll want 2 elastic bandages for this long arm splint. Tear off some pieces of tape so they are within reach at the end of the splint. Then open the elastic bandage. Some packages have a red dotted line in the middle. Twist to open the plastic. It's much easier to take off. I recommend taking those sharp clips and throwing them in the garbage. They tend to hurt people. Start by positioning your patient with the arm supported, perhaps with a couple pillows under the arm. You will want some assistance from a parent or another staff to help hold the fingers. The thumb should be pointing towards the shoulder, so the wrist and forearm are in neutral. I begin by placing padding around the wrist to provide extra coverage for that ulnar styloid. Then come up through the hand, tearing from the bottom to go through the first web space. Come back around under the thumb and then back up through the hand. We will want a total of 2 layers of padding through the splint with additional padding at the edges. As I continue to work my way down, I overlap by 50%. Be sure not to pull too hard on the padding, but simply laying it down. There should be no tension in the padding. Overlapping by 50% all the way up the forearm, making sure the elbow is staying at 90 degrees and her thumb is pointing towards her shoulder so the forearm is in neutral. Then I place one hand in the antecubital fossa and I go back and forth, creating an accordion fold. Back and forth. This creates a lot of great padding at the epicondyles and around the olecranon. Make sure to have your next roll of padding handy. Slide the sleeve up so you can get all the way up into the axilla as you continue the padding. I fast forward a little bit here, but you can see continuing to wrap by 50% overlap all the way up to the axilla, and then going around and around at least 3 to 4 times in the axilla. Now taking a piece and folding it lengthwise. This creates 2 more layers in the palm. So this will go right around the distal palmar crease and MCP joints to avoid the splint rubbing. Now to measure for the splint. You could use a piece of padding, you could use a measuring tape. There's different ways to do this, but you're going to want to measure how long the splint needs to be. So starting at the ulnar hand, going down to the olecranon, and then up into the axilla, stopping just short of the edge of the padding. This will be your template for the splint. Very important to pull the edges of the padding over the fiberglass at both ends before you get it wet. Get the splint wet, use room temperature to cold water, which will help it set up fast. Wring out as much water as possible. Place the splint in a towel. Fold the towel over the splint and wring out as much water as possible. I call this the burrito trick. Now it's time to apply the splint. Start by placing it just inside the edge of the padding at the ulnar hand along the wrist and forearm, making sure the forearm is not supinated or pronated but in neutral, and then the splint goes up to the posterior upper arm, molding the splint around the elbow. Whether you have a coworker or parent helping you, they could help hold the splint, but I'm going to use my patient at this point. Take the elastic bandage now and unroll it about 4 to 5 inches in, make a cut. This cut that you just made goes in the first web space. Using caution not to cause any downward pressure in that web space. Make sure the elastic bandage is rolling off right against the splint and tucking that end in. Then we begin to overlap by 50%, working our way down the splint. we're going to let the elastic bandage do the molding. Make sure there isn't too much tension in the elastic bandage, just about 50%. As you get close to the elbow, you'll want to mold the splint around the elbow and then do a figure 8 where you go around the upper arm and then back down at the elbow to get the area that wasn't covered before. Now I made it with one 3-inch elastic bandage for this pediatric patient. You'll want to use discretion as to maybe using 2 elastic bandages to make sure we have full coverage of the splint. Then use some tape to secure the edges at the proximal end, around the hand in the first web space. If you didn't use a stockinette, sometimes some padding can start to come out around the thumb. Just encourage them to tuck it back in, poke that padding in rather than pulling it out. Then rest the arm on the pillow while the splint sets up. And you're done! While the splint is setting up, this is a good time to remind the patient of 2 tips and 3 rules. The first tip is put a cold pack in the armpit. This can really help with pain. The second tip is to keep the hand elevated, usually on a couple pillows. Here are the 3 rules important for every splint that you apply, spelling them out for the patient and asking them to recite them back to you. All right, I hope that video was helpful for you. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel to be updated when new content is available. Also check out OrthoRefresh.com under the section How To for more videos with tips and tricks. We're also on Instagram and Facebook with the handle OrthoRefresh to find information on tips and pearls for patient care, provider wellness ideas, and fun. OrthoRefresh aims to be a tool in your tool belt as you care for patients. Thanks for watching.